Good evening, councillors, and good evening, Pastor Michael Hall of the Way Church. Welcome to you. Can you hear us, Pastor?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're starting off with prayers by Pastor Michael Hall. So over to you, Pastor.
Thank you. Paul, when writing to the church at Colossae, wrote these words: "Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another. And if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. And above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you are called in one body. And be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, with thankfulness in your hearts to God. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him." Father God, we are told in Scripture that all those in authority are there because you have placed them there, and therefore we should pray for them. So that we do tonight, Father. We pray first of all for our royal family, especially the Queen, in these very difficult times that she has been through, with the loss of her husband, with family splits and other problems which have cropped up, Lord. We thank you that she knows you as her Lord and Saviour, and you have been her refuge and her strength. And we pray that you'll continue to be that refuge and strength in her life as she comes up to celebrate the 70th year of her ascension to the throne. Lord, we pray for those in our government, Lord, in these very difficult times with all sorts of things going on and divisions and various accusations being made. Lord, I just pray that your wisdom will prevail in all these things and your will be done within our government. Lord, I pray that you will instill a spirit of truth and wisdom in each of them, both those in government and those in opposition. We pray for your guidance. We pray also for the levels of government, the lower levels, Lord, with the county councils, the borough council. And I pray especially for this meeting tonight, Lord, as the councillors here gather to discuss things that will determine the future of our town and our community. Lord, I pray that your wisdom will once again prevail through all things, and your will be done. Father, I thank you for those who give up their time to serve the community in the way that they do. And I pray that you'll bless them, you'll encourage them, and allow them in meeting together to discuss with a sense of respect for each other and unity among them. I pray too for the administration staff who make sure everything is done legally and, Lord, is recorded properly. I pray that you bless them and encourage them and strengthen them as well. Father, we pray your blessing and your guidance upon this meeting as we say the prayer that Jesus taught his disciples. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And I pray that the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all forever and ever. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you.
You are more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but I can fully understand if you
Okay. Thank you.
need to go on other things.
Thank
you very much. Okay, so to the agenda, item 1, apologies. Town Clerk, any apologies?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have apologies from councillors Dunsmore, Martin, Ward and Wicks. It is possible that Councillor Ward may be able to join us later.
Okay. Disclosures of interest, Town Clerk.
There have been none received so far, although it may well be that when we come to discuss any individual grants, members may wish to make specific declarations. It is common that if you take them on block and we don't discuss individual items, that you don't need to individually record your disclosure for those.
Town Clerk, could you please note that I do have a non-pecuniary interest in item 10.1, community grants, as I am a trustee of Hale Community Centre and would not participate in any discussion or debate. Thank you.
Excuse me, is that not a pecuniary interest?
Yes, normally that would be a pecuniary interest, Councillor Evans, but as you're remote and you don't have a vote, it won't necessarily, you won't be participating in the vote anyway, but for that item you shouldn't speak. Thank you.
Noted, thank you.
Thank you very much. Turning to the minutes of the last meeting, you all had a chance to look at them. Do you agree that I sign those as a correct record of what went on at the last meeting? Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Questions and statements by the public. Have we received any, Town Clerk?
None received, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And yeah, Town Mayor's announcements. I've got the privilege again of bringing you some very, very good news. So we have been chosen, so it's Farnham Town Council, for the Corporate Livewire South England Prestige Awards for not-for-profit organisations of the year 21-22. So another award trophy to add to our mantelpiece. The winner is for the awards, and it's focused on small and medium enterprises. So Town Council qualifies as for a prestige award. The awards ceremony will take place at the end of February. And at this moment in time, just once again, I want to thank, a big thank you to the staff, councillors, volunteers for yet another recognition of all that Farnham Town Council does for the local residents and local business and the community locally. So another accolade for Farnham Town Council. So well done, everyone. I don't know if people realise, but today is Holocaust Memorial Day, and it was a privilege to be present at the ceremony at Rowledge Primary School this morning, and it was a tree planting ceremony, one of 80 nationally with the Association of Jewish Refugees. So it was great to see some Year 6 pupils taking place. They sung us a song and they spoke about the things that they were doing in school to commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day. So it's a very good morning this morning. So that was very enjoyable. Okay, Town Clerk, item 6, questions by members. Have we any?
None received, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. So on to part 1, items for decisions. So item 7, working group notes. To receive the notes and any recommendations of the tourism and events working group held on the 12th of January. Councillor Evans, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you can see, tourism and events continues to be busy. We're going to get quotes for moonflower lighting for the staging for the switch on of the Christmas lights next year, to make more of a spectacle of it. The minutes note that the snow trail was extremely successful, and likewise the Christmas market. Late night shopping is no longer the highlight of the shopkeeper's life, I'm afraid. And so we would be looking at how that might proceed next year. Perhaps there will just be one late night shopping. Interesting also to see the Witcher installation, which was in Castle Street, and the Mayor's Charity is receiving a £500 donation. So well done, Mr. Mayor. Please note that Music in the Vineyard will not occur in January and February because of COVID and the changing rules and regulations. We decided that it would not be premature to actually cancel that in advance. One of the highlights of the coming programme is the Literary Festival, which is being chaired by Councillor Miralles. And although I've not spoken to her, Councillor Miralles, might you like to do an update on that?
Yes, just to say, I've been abused by my horse, so it's not my makeup that's gone wrong. I haven't got mad woman makeup, it's just my horse. Let it go. The Literary Festival is really going great guns now. We've got practically all the venues that we wanted, with various different things going on. We've got lots of stuff going into the schools. The library is part and parcel of that. The launch ceremony is going to be at the Pottery, with sort of flash things going on. And then we have the opening ceremony at the Spire Church. I think, I don't know why this thing's making so much noise. We've really gone, and I think I've said this before to everybody, we've embraced the whole lot. So even we've even got the person who runs the vineyard doing something, so the Lebanese evening, and talks with that, and also one of the major drill mark artists at the, the vineyard. When he told me that was not so cool. It's drill now. So okay, yeah, you did. But anyway, he's there. So we've got the Blue Bear Bookshop hosting quite a lot of things. So it's gone across the board. We've got the UCA have got their actors going to be going through doing flash monologues that they've written throughout the town, and then they're having a competition to obviously, which will be marked at the UCA, but they're third-year students there, and they're also going to be 2 or 3 of them doing readings for the authors who are going to be interviewed. If you go onto our site, and if you go onto Eventbrite, you'll see all the ones that are up and ready to be booked. So there's some really interesting people, from philosophers through to children's stories, to poets, to museum historical, but I mean, and the Shakespeare walks. I mean, we have actually covered just about everything you can cover. So I think it'd be really enjoyable. So get people to have a look at the site, get onto the Eventbrite if you're interested as well. And yeah, I think it's Ollie's been brilliant. There's a hell of a lot of work to do, but I think it's going to be quite good if we can all come together. Okay.
Thank you very much for that. It's the first year, as you know, and so it's very much a testing time for us, but it's really coming together quite brilliantly. And Ollie confirmed today that everything is now up to date, so you can look online and see all the programme and all the events. A lot of hard work being done by the volunteers as well as our staff, so thank you to them all. Just moving on quickly, Sustainability Festival. It's now agreed as the 22nd of May, if you would like to put that in your diaries. And Music in the Meadow, that's too being looked at by Ollie. I think he's finding it really quite difficult to know what to prioritise, but he's managing very well. Platinum Jubilee, we're going for a theme. We've sorted out the timings for the Saturday, and we'll now be operating from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And in addition to the Farnham Symphonia, there will be other bands as well. The meeting with the Lions has taken place about the Carnival Sunday, and we're in discussions as to what the theme would be. You'll note that Market on West Street, we've got 2 applications for vegan markets, and those are being looked at by the events manager. The stall rate on Farmers Market has been discussed by Strategy and Finance, and you'll find a recommendation coming forward there. I'm not aware that we've heard anything further on the Walking Festival. We await that one. The Town Crier update, real determination to get that post filled before the Jubilee, and Ollie is working on application forms which will be reviewed, and then a short list will be drawn up of criers who will then be in competition, and we are receiving a great deal of support from the National Guild, whose chairman is the town crier in Hazelmere. There is one recommendation from the committee. I don't think there's anything else. The recommendation, Mr. Mayor, shall I pass that to you?
Thank you very much, Councillor. Yes, so this is to do with the bid update and the recommendation to Council. It's recommended that Mosaic be appointed to lead the bid project to vote stage at the cost of £20,000 with welcome-backed funding and the earmarked funds from Farnham Town Council. And standing order contracts be waived in order to appoint specialist consultants, Mosaic, to work with the Chamber of Commerce and local businesses. Councillor Dixon.
Sorry, I must have missed something here. The first line of that recommendation doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Mosaic is, I don't know, what is?
Mosaic is the...
And what's the bid project to vote stage? What does that mean? Oh,
ask the town clerk to clarify that.
Yes, Councillor Dixon, I mean, it's a long time, so I can understand why you may have forgotten. Back in 2019, Mosaic is a company that presented to the council on the detail of creating a business improvement district. So that's the bid. It has to be a business-led project, and we applied for funding from the government's Welcome Back Fund. and Waverley has also allocated some of its money from the government's Welcome Back Fund to actually underwrite the cost, or virtually all of the cost of Mosaic undertaking the work with the business community. It's quite a technical process. They've been involved in 131 bids, as the minutes state, taking them to implementation stage, and 13 of those have been done during lockdown. So the Business Improvement District is one whereby businesses create their business plan for spending 1 or 2% of the business rate locally. So as more and more funding of the business rates is taken back and centralised and moved to other parts of the country, this is one little bit of the money that the businesses pay as business rates is retained locally. And so through this recommendation, you're agreeing to waive standing orders contracts to appoint a specialist consultant, and that specialist consultant be Mosaic because of their experience.
Councillor Pittman.
Just correct me if I'm wrong, I thought actually, if you gave a bid earlier, don't the business have to pay extra business rates to cover the cost?
This is essentially what the vote is all about. They agree, if they agree that they wish to pay an extra business rate of 1 or 2%, that is then collected on top of the business rates, but it's retained locally and spent by them.
Any further questions on that? Let's move to the recommendation. Oh, Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very grateful to the town clerk for explaining that. I would have voted against it otherwise. I found that explanation quite adequate, and it's pity it was not given more space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So, councillors, is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Back to you, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sponsorship for the Literary Festival is not perhaps as easy as it might be because it is a new function, but Ollie tells me today that he's still working on it. And of course, we have got a budget item to cover it anyway. We looked at the financial position, which we found was healthy. And Mr. Mayor, that is the end of the notes of that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Evans. Just again, for councillors' notice, a little bit more information on the town crier update. Although it's in the tourism and events working group, the town crier is a civic post, and the mayor, deputy mayor, and lead member for tourism and events will be on the appointments panel when candidates come forward. So just a little bit more information on that one. Thank you very much. We now turn to working group notes, to receive the notes and any recommendations from the Strategy and Finance Group held on 18th of January 2022. And I call on Councillor John Neal to present those.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everybody. We met on the 18th of January, as just been said, and we reviewed the finance reports as usual. They're included in the agenda pack, which came with the Strategy and Finance report, if you haven't got that somewhere. The highlights for you, I'll just point out that at the current point in time, income is running at 117% of budget because we've been fortunate to receive some SIL money and some Section 106 money recently, and a grant income, which has boosted the income, shall we say. On the expenditure side, we're at 62% of budget. But we've got some significant projects about to start. The income there is obviously accounted for mainly on specific projects that we've got coming along. So that's all looking healthy this time of the year. The working group also reviewed the fees and charges for the next financial year for the services that we produce, and there's a schedule of those attached in Annex 1. I don't think there's anything in particular I want to draw attention to there. Oh yes, there's one point I wanted to make, which is that the group agreed to recommend that the officers be given some flexibility when negotiating fees and the sponsorship arrangements, so that they can secure the best deals for the council. I'm sure they'll be in line with our schedule, but sometimes you have to do a bit of bargaining there. So moving on to one more thing before I take a pause. We also reviewed the investment strategy, and that's attached in Annex 2 for you. So would anyone like to bring any questions at that point in time before we go to any recommendations?
Councillor Beeman?
Yeah, just a short question. If we discount the silver receipts and section 161 and the grant income, what does that, is the budget still online for income? I don't.
Yes, once they're discounted, it brings it closer to the actual that we're expecting. So
Over 100%.
you'll still be just over 100%.
Good. Okay, there's no more questions. We'll go to the recommendation. So there's 3 of these. So the first one is that the fees and charges set out in the report at Annex 1 be agreed. Councillors, is that agreed? Agreed, thank you. Item 2, the town clerk be authorised to use discretion to negotiate the best arrangement for the council in relation to sponsorship and items where more complex arrangements are planned using the approved fees and charges as the basis for discussion. Councillors, is that agreed? Thank you. And finally, the investment strategy at Annex 2 to the notes of the Strategy and Finance Working Group be adopted. Councillors, is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Back to you, Councillor Neal.
Thank you. So I'm going on to item 5, which is the internal audit report. Members will be aware that we've had a newly appointed internal auditor this year. So obviously he takes a slightly different view on things than the previous ones would have done. The report came back very favourably, no big worries there for us to be concerned about. There's a list of them in the annex. I think it's Annex 1 in the papers here. And the officers have responded in Annex 2, little Roman 2, to the comments of the auditor there. So that's all there for you to see. Any questions before we go to a recommendation on that?
Thank you, Councillor Neal. So we'll take the 2 together. The internal auditor's report be welcomed and the officers' responses be agreed. Is that agreed, councillors? Agreed. Thank you very much. Back to you, Councillor Neal.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the precept, but we have that as a separate agenda item tonight, so I'm going to skip that one for now and go on to item 7. That is just an indication that we have a new timetable for meetings in 2022, 2023. You're welcome to look at it. I imagine that we're not going to have many concerns about that. And there's a note here in the notes as well, which says that the working group did consider whether we should review the working group structure for next year, which we've been considering for some time, but it was felt that it was not practical to make a recommendation to the council at this stage because we've all been too busy actually to pursue that subject for now. Does anyone have any concerns about that? If not, I'll carry straight on. Okay, so the next item there is number 8, which is the risk management report. So the council has a comprehensive risk management policy, which is overseen primarily by two external organisations. In Annex 4 of your pack is the council's risk management review for 2021-22. That's the internally produced review. And the external reviews are the work of the internal auditor, who covers pretty much all aspects of our operations here, and that's been discussed already. And the second major external review is the work of the health and safety audit, which is carried out by a company called WorkNest. Now, I think we were expecting their report and review to have been done by around now, but it hasn't happened yet. So we'll come back when that is ready, and hopefully in the next meeting or so. It has happened now, but we're not ready to report yet, I don't think. No. Okay, thank you. All this work, of course, is underpinned by government health and safety legislation and the contracts that we have with insurers, which also keep an eye on how we operate and everything else. Our working group also review risks relating to our working groups, I mean, also review the risks relating to their activities. So that is on top of anything else I've mentioned. Any questions, councillors? If not, there are two recommendations now.
So we'll take the two recommendations together. The 2021 risk management report be welcomed and adopted, and the work done by working groups in managing risk be noted. Councillors, is that agreed? Thank you very much. Back to you, Councillor.
Thank you. So now we're steaming along. We're on to item 9, which is contracts and assets update. I'm happy to cover that. Yes. Okay. So there are a number of items here that are highlighted in your notes. Briefly, the listed gates from West Street Cemetery are now with the repairers somewhere up north, I forget quite where. Wigan, that's the word. And they're scheduled for completion in May. That is a huge task with a delicate piece of ironmongery there. So we look forward to seeing those come back and get back where they used to be. We obviously have a commitment to do that. It's a pretty expensive job. The second item mentioned is the refurbishment of the central car park toilets, which are now scheduled to commence in the spring and still intended to be completed by May. Councillor Hess.
Just going back to the gates, point 1, there's reference there to the railings project, 106 funded, section 106 funded railings project. I think this has been kicking around for a long time. Could Town Clerk or yourself just remind us which 106 agreement this is coming from and exactly the scope of the work on the railings? I'm interested because it's just down the road from where I am, and I've been aware of that pending for quite a long time. It's kind of gone off radar a bit. I'm glad to see it in there. Could you just bring us back up to date quickly? Thanks.
Yes, Councillor Hess. The 106 related to the Dewsons development, housing there, and it was essentially to be complementary to the work on the gates. So as you go in where the gates are being refurbished, there would have been railings on the approaches on both sides of the pillars, going down to the Lion Brewery, and also going further along towards Coxbridge. The money available was quite small, actually. It's about £10,000, I believe, maybe slightly more. I haven't got the figure to hand. We have asked Lost Art of Wigan, when they were down last week collecting the gates, to give us an additional price. We've had some prices already for that work, And we're hoping that, and we have a design already that has been prepared, it's been through the assets group in the past. It will go back through the assets group before any work is implemented. So I would anticipate an update at the next strategy and finance and then the next council meeting.
Thank you very much. Can you keep us sort of updated on that? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, so I was just starting to talk about the central car park. Sorry, go ahead.
I wonder if I could ask a question actually in relation to the refurbishment of the toilet. And first, as a comment, it seems to me that's a very appropriate use of still money if there's community infrastructure. But I just wondered, has the council got any estimate yet of the amount of still money that's going to come to the council in the coming year? And secondly, what procedures are we going to set up to allocate the money at Waverley level, which of course Waverley is a much bigger council, got much bigger still money coming to them. They have a committee specifically to advise the council on the allocation of still money. Are we going to have a equivalent procedure, or is it going to be decided by this committee sort of thing, or advised to the council from this committee?
So serious questions there, and the answer to each is in parts because of the way that it's evolved. So until this year, we had about I think it was £30,000 of SIL, which didn't make it practical to go through any process of substance because it, the amount of effort involved in going through a process to allocate the money was too great. We have our community infrastructure led task group that has been appointed by council. After it had created the processes that we had to follow, which have been through council, council agreed that we wouldn't allocate we wouldn't run an external competition, if you like, for applying for funds, but we would focus on the areas which were in the council's responsibility to begin with, which met the criteria. As it happens, this is the first time that we have looked at allocating any of the SIL funding, but just before Christmas, we received the SIL money in two parts, in October and in April. And just before Christmas, we received the first substantial tranche, which was about £141,000, and that came from 8 different projects which have been constructed in Farnham over the past year, or now that SIL payments, phased payments, are actually due. It's quite difficult to actually predict how much money we're going to be due, because the developers are quite canny now at firstly making planning applications to minimise their SIL contributions, and secondly to contest the amount of SIL that they are actually due to pay. So we can come up with a number, but that number for the totality of the housing that's going to be built in Farnham in the next 2 or 3 years could be wildly off because of all these challenges that the developers are doing and because they keep avoiding paying their contributions. So I think now we have a larger sum that has come forward. It does mean that in the, I'd say the coming municipal year, probably not the rest of this council year, we will re-establish the infrastructure levy task group, and it will have a proper job to do now with the amount of money that's come forward.
Thank you.
Okay, so I was talking about the central car park toilets there. One thing that came up in the working group was a recommendation by Councillor Dunsmore that we looked a bit more detail at the personal safety aspects in the ladies' toilet, question of where the sinks are placed and that sort of thing. So the working group did agree that it would be wise to spend some further money in the order of £10,000 to improve the layout there. So there's a recommendation, two recommendations here, which I'll pass now, I think, for any questions and to the Mayor.
Councillor Dickinson.
Just wanted to explain about the suggestion for Councillor Dunmore, because it's the ladies' toilets and you might not be as familiar with it as I am. So just to say that in the ladies' toilets, you've got 3 stalls or 4 stalls, I can't remember. And then where there could be a 5th stall, we've got the 2 sinks. This means that the sinks are sort of tucked away around the back. And so you're right at the far end of the toilets and you've got your back turned and you're right in the dark corner. So I've only been in there a couple of times because actually my spider instincts tell me not to stay in there very long because you get stuck in that corner and it's quite a long way from, it's 4 stalls at the back and you know there's no way out, there's only one way out. So you get in there and you get this real, you know, don't stay for too long because it's a really dark corner. And you're trying to wash your hands, so you've got your back to the door as well. So this is what Paul was saying. The sinks are, you know, we just need to put them somewhere else to make it more less. Yeah, that's what I wanted to explain to everyone about those, because you probably will never go in there. Anyway, that's just what to say. Thank you.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, Councillor. Yes.
Yes, it's about the ladies' toilet. I'm not a regular frequenter of public toilets generally. No, but seriously, I hope that in the rebuilding of the toilets there will be good lighting. You know, the reference to dark corners is maybe referring back to the way it is now, but hopefully we'll have downlighters or good lighting so that aren't dark corners, and shifting the arrangements around so that they're not tucked away and hidden is what this £10,000 is supposed to be for. And the other question is, if ladies are concerned about their safety and security once they're inside the ladies' toilet, maybe we should arrange to have the town CCTV camera system in the vicinity outside, so that well, because if a man was to go into the ladies' side of the toilet, I mean, I'm talking about out in the car park, not inside. There could be some evidence just to give ladies security. Just a thought. Okay, thank you.
Town Clerk.
Councillor Hess will be pleased to know that as part of the construction, we are reinstalling CCTV cameras in the car park to overlook exactly as you've requested it, partly to protect the materials and items that are there for the construction period. But of course, once they're up, then we've discussed it with Waverley. We're also putting in a second camera, which will be to their benefit, because the main cost is getting the equipment and the connections back in there. Originally, there were CCTV cameras in all the car parks, and these failed some time ago, and Waverley didn't want them at that stage, but they're content for it to be replaced and reinstated. So that is what is happening.
Back to Councillor Neil.
Okay, so I don't think there's anything more needs to be said there. As it said in the notes, we're going to allocate £40,000 that's recommended from SIL allocation to this project. Over to you, Mayor, for 2 recommendations there, please.
So I'll take this in 2 parts. So the first one is the proposed safety improvements in the ladies' toilet be incorporated at a cost of £10,099. Is that agreed? Yep. And are members happy that a SIL allocation of £40,000 for the public toilets refurbishment in Central Car Park be agreed? Is that agreed, Councillor? Thank you very much. Back to you, Councillor Neil.
Thank you. The next item that's listed here, number 3, is a review of the mobile phone and radio system that the officers mainly use outside every day and during the events that we have. Obviously, that current system has been around for a while, and there are better facilities available now, and an upgrade will be needed, obviously, at some stage anyway. So the Mr. McCready has been looking at options here. He's still got a bit more work to do, and that will come back in a further meeting, I think. Okay, so let's just keep you in touch with that one.
So I've just noticed Councillor Edmonds had hands up. You put it down now. Did you want to say something, Councillor Edmonds?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to support Councillor Hare's wise suggestion, excuse me, in terms of cameras. Cameras deter crime, and we really need to use cameras wherever they would be appropriate. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Back to you, Councillor Neil.
Thank you. So moving on to update you on the greenhouse situation. As you all know, we had a fire there last year, which devastated the greenhouse and the electrical supply and everything else. This year we've managed to get by without the facility mainly. But next year we were fortunate in finding facility at Secrets Garden Centre, which is over in Milford, if I remember right. They are prepared to loan us some space for the current season. Our officers also found, when they were visiting Secrets, that they had some surplus greenhouses in their possession. So there was a conversation around that, and the upshot of which is that we are keen to take those greenhouses off their hands, which is very fortunate, and to be able to use those instead of buying and purchasing new ones from scratch. So they're in good structural condition. They'll be dismantled professionally and rebuilt properly on our site, and it's reckoned that they'll meet our needs very favourably. Don't think there's anything more specifically to say on that, unless anyone has any questions. But if not, there is two recommendations, Mayor, please.
So I'll take these as two separate recommendations. So the arrangements for the 2022 planting season be noted. Is that agreed? And secondly, the concept of acquiring and adapting a second-hand greenhouse from Secrets be pursued in consultation with the council's insurer. Is that agreed, councillors? Agreed. Thank you very much.
Okay, so number 5 there on the list was a discussion on a number of other less insignificant items. One being that the lift in this building is causing continual troubles from time to time, which cost us money, but there's not much we can do about it. We just have to get it repaired, obviously, at whatever the cost is, to meet our obligations on lift provision. The outside workforce have also been looking at upgrading grass cutting facilities, tools for the cemeteries, and they are looking into that at the moment. And I think there's also a machine for clearing moss and weeds from pathways, which they're keen to look at as well. So we'll get more specific feedback on that next time around, I think.
Leader, could I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Not very good on protocol. I just want to put in a reminder that in the working group, when the matter of the repair, servicing, maintenance of the lift came up, it's not here, the figure, but there was a really big figure for what sounded like an electronic control unit. It was a mega amount of money, and I did urge we get a second price, if not a third price, so that we're not being stitched up. Because I know we've got to have a lift, I get that, absolutely. In fact, I think Councillor Evans got trapped in it recently, and we really don't want that happening. But we don't want to be stitched up either and charge ridiculous amounts of money by a lift contractor that probably thinks they've got the sort of the in on it, and we're not going to seek better prices. So I'd just like some assurance that we're not going to be taken for a ride on this. Thank you.
Thank you. The town clerk would like to answer that. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Hess. You'll be glad to know that the only ride we want to take is one from the ground floor to the first floor, and that the third line of the minutes does say that it will be subject to a further report at the next meeting. The reason why there aren't any speculative figures in the notes so far is because that's what they are, speculative, and we want you to have correct information before you make a decision.
Very good. Thank you.
Back to you, Councillor Neil.
Thank you. Okay, the only other item I didn't mention on that is that working group, including progress on the quinennial tree inspections, is going on as well. So any further feedback on that, on the cost of the equipment that might be going to be bought, we'll come back next time, I think. Any further questions on that whole section? If not, I'll carry straight on to item 10 there, which is about the community grants. So you have on page 27 the summary of the grants that have been evaluated by Strategy and Finance and are presented here for council. Now, just to recap for you, the grants split into 4 broad categories. The more significant grants that help to sustain the larger community organisations and these support the work of the council. These are covered by service level agreements, SLAs, and there are 6 listed here, amounting to £54,500. Now, each of these organisations has come in recently over the last 2 months and presented to us their plans for the future and their justification for the money that they are seeking from us. All those meetings were very constructive and very useful to us, and we didn't have any major concerns about what they were saying. One item that I would like to point out is that when we were speaking to the Hale Community Centre, we found that they no longer received any support from the Vivid Housing Association that is meant to support their community members. So their source of funding is not really very well assured in a sustainable way. So they're always looking for outside support and trying to do what they can to generate income themselves. So we have undertaken to write to Vivid and see if there's anything else we can do to see whether they can make a contribution in the future there. Now, the range of the community grants that are listed are Appendix 1, and I think they've been passed around just now on cover of A3 sheet of paper.
I'd just like to put in a comment on what the leader was just referring to regarding the Hale Community Centre, that we will review the grant later in the year with a view on the evidence we have about Vivid, etc., considering upping the grant for them. That was mentioned, so we're going to revisit that. It's not a closed book because it is quite a small grant for them, and they do hugely good work up in Hale. Anyway, I just wanted to say that for the record. Thank you.
Councillor Mowbray.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was surprised that the Hale got only 2,000. We know that this is the most deprived area in the whole of our borough. Gostre have got very good reserves, They get a lot of funding from Waverley, and they, from my point of view, from what I know, I don't think that they service the amount of people that they should be doing. Whereas I know that up at Hale, Cathy Burrows has working really hard to try and get that place up and running and working well. I realise that they've got a good grant this time from Surrey, but I just was very surprised that we didn't see that places like Hale weren't going to get more than this £2,000. So I just wanted to say that. And I'm glad to hear you might be reviewing it and that you would try to help them further. Thanks.
Councillor Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I have to agree. I understand Vivid are not the easiest people to deal with, and generosity is something they don't understand. And we mustn't forget North Farnham. North Farnham is a very depressed area, and perhaps we have undercalculated the money they need now, particularly considering that Vivid, the new people there are less than helpful. So this is something we should seriously consider upping the money a bit, because they do a super job there, and they really deserve it. And we need to look after our harder up relatives as well. Thank you.
Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to say I was quite shocked when I read this paragraph and realised that Vivid have been denied contribution to the community centre. Is there any possibility you might know how much they've been deprived, or is that confidential?
I don't know the actual figure, but if I tell you that prior to the funding situation changing probably 15 years ago, the costs of the manager of what was then the bungalow were fully funded through the previous housing association that ran the estate. It was gradually transferred, and Farnham Town Council began to make a contribution probably 8 or 9 years ago. And at that stage, a large proportion of the costs were then being met by Waverley Borough Council through the housing department. I'm not sure of the actual breakdown these days, but it was quite a surprise to me when I found out that the housing association, whose tenants, are largely there, was not contributing. Hence the recommendation of the working group that we should write, and also we said we'd seek the support of Head of Housing at Waverley to also write to see if we can encourage them to make a contribution.
So I've seen Councillor Kirkman's hand and Councillor Merrill, secondly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, just to say that what's in the notes is what we agreed, because it was at the presentation that we discovered Vivid. It just came out in the conversation. We'd assumed up to that point that the housing association was still, whoever it was, whatever the name was still contributing. And we do know, obviously, that because especially with all the changes, there are funds at the moment coming into Hale Community Centre and for project work as well as for just sort of day to day. So, what we have said there is exactly what we thought at the time. We didn't know about Vivid. We are going to write to Vivid. We will be firm with them. We will see what other sources of funding are available, but then we will come back and revisit it. I mean, it's perfectly clear in the notes, I would have thought.
Councillor Merrill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it's I was at that on that call, and it was very clear. It just came out of the blue for us. I'd like to know a bit more about the history. Vivid were supporting, and as well as writing to Zach at Waverley, I'd be interested as to what Vivid originally committed to, and whether they're breaching either the letter or spirit of something that they committed to, however long ago it was. But just it does occur to me that there may be, and I might be misreading this, sort of a shortcut here. If I jump ahead and look at Annex 1 and see that we're proposing there to allocate only £15,000, £17,500 that's in the notes for the New Year community grants. I'd be happy to propose that the difference between the 15 and the 17.5 go to the Hale Community Centre.
Town clerk.
You can do that, and that's exactly why this report comes to council for consideration. What I would ask you to consider is how far you wish to change the balance of what is available to all the individual community organisations versus what you're going to then commit through the service level agreements route. The other options that you have are to adjust any of the numbers that are within the SLA route. Now, when that was considered by the Strategy and Finance Group, they determined not to do that this year for various reasons, and wanted to follow the route that was identified in terms of seeing if there could be greater support that would be given to the Hale Community Centre through the Housing Association, rather than trying to patch it up in a particular way. But members are entitled to make those recommendations, and of course officers will implement whatever decisions you come up with.
Councillor Coburn.
Yes, just to come back on that point, that was the dilemma we had, that you look at figures, and if you start taking money or giving extra money to one organisation, you have to justify it, obviously. And when we were looking at the figures, I mean, these were all worked out, having had the presentation, and we thought fairly, if we start adjusting Hale Community Centre, what about 40 degrees, and this is what happens when we start. We used to do every single grant around this council chamber, and it was a nightmare, because people would say, well, I think they need £25 more, and I think they need 50. And we were here hours, some of you remember it was hours and hours and hours, because everybody deserves the money. There are no organisations in Farnham that are working with the community that don't deserve money. So that's my only argument. When we looked at it, we thought this was the fair way of dealing with it now. But that's not to say that, we won't improve it later.
So we've got a number of hands. So we'll take Councillor Fraser first, Councillor Atfield, Councillor Merrill. So can I come back to Councillor Dixon? Have we got a proposal in front of us? So,
I think Mark made the proposal.
So I just need to clarify to assist the mayor in the process. If we have a recommendation that has been seconded, and need to check with Councillor Merrill whether he wishes to pursue that recommendation, then that does need to take precedence in the conversation that we're going to take place. So if it's been proposed, and I think Councillor Dixon seconded it, then that should be the next element of debate before we go back to the main discussion on grants.
Yeah, I'd hate to do anything prematurely. So I did use the conditional sense. I'd be happy to propose it, but I think Councillor Coburn's made a point which I thoroughly agree with and should have made myself, which is that at the moment, before we've considered Annex 1, there is clearly a difference between 15,000 and 17,500. And I fully agree with Councillor Coburn that if we are contemplating taking some of that spare and allocating it somewhere, or proposing to allocate it somewhere tonight, there may be arguments for 40 degrees, there may be arguments for the others, but at the moment all I'm hearing is an argument for the Hale. So it was in that spirit that I threw that up in the air and to see what happens. But so no, I'm not making a proposal, but it's clearly a discussion we've got to have, so we may as well get on with it.
Okay, so we come back to the questions that I've got. So Councillor Fraser, Councillor Atfield, and then Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. Bearing in mind, of course, all considerations on whatever balance there is between other residential groups, I would like to think, as councillor of Upper Hale, that we depend upon the council's support to reimburse by whatever means the Hale Community Centre for whatever funds they are falling short due to the reluctance of Vivid to give their support. And I would like to think there was some means of advertising the fact that Vivid have withdrawn their support.
Councillor Hatfield.
I support what Councillor Coburn said, and I feel at this point in time, we should go by what we've got written in these notes, that the working group was willing to revisit the support from Farnham Town Council once the situation has been clarified. So we are writing to Vivid, we're asking Vivid to reconsider what's going on. Once we've got a firm response from them as to whether they are or aren't going to continue support, then we should stick by the note we've got in here and carry on as we are at the moment with the point of revisited support once we know the situation is clarified. Thank you.
Good point, Councillor Hatfield. And finally, Councillor Dixon.
Yes, I didn't attend all of the presentations. I didn't realise all these groups presented. I was only invited to the Hale Community Centre presentation. And just to put it into context, they actually asked for 6,000, and they had a specific requirement for that, which was quite well detailed in their presentation. And I was shocked to hear about Vivid, but actually not that shocked, because some of you may remember the Vivid is the housing association who had the jolly good idea of selling the parking from underneath the residents' cars. They are one of our favourite housing associations, clearly, and I don't think we've been able to do anything about that. So I don't know how successful we will be. And I was very grateful to both the head of town council and to town clerk, who agreed that if the only thing we could do was review it in a few months, then we would review it in a few months. But if we could find the 4,000 tonight, then that would be jolly nice. Thank you.
Town clerk.
Yeah, I just wanted to go a little bit of caution into the conversation on what Councillor Fraser said, because he used the language which, whilst I understand it, could put the council in a bit of bother, in the sense that he said, by whatever amount is short. And I just think that's a little bit dangerous for us. And I think if members are agreeable to us clarifying the position, because we've only heard secondhand that we'd have stopped their funding. We don't actually have that categorically from them. And we do owe it to them to actually check that and be clear about what we are advising members. We can promise you a proper report back, and hopefully a solution that will meet the issues that members have raised tonight.
Back to Councillor Mill.
Thank you. So I think that discussion pretty much covered what was also voiced in the Strategy and Finance Working Group. And hence we came to the conclusions that we did, which we just covered. Let me just carry on then to the community grants list, the big list. So these are grants of up to £2,000 for the various organisations. The list has been compiled by the officers and scrutinised by the working group. So as you can see, there was a budget of 17,500, of which 15,000 or so has been allocated. So perhaps we have some flexibility to review that somewhere in the future after we've talked to Hale and Vivid and anyone else. If there's any comments on that list, I'll take them now. If not, I'll just move on. Sally.
Just a quick question. Where is, sorry, geography is failing me. Where is Heron's Way? Because we've got the Girl Guiding Surrey West.
Oh,
yes,
sorry, I don't know where it is.
Yeah, I don't know where it is. It's only been used by 7% of residents.
Sheep Hatch, it's right there. If you go along Sheep Hatch, and straight out to Tilford. And turn left, over the bridge, then straight down Sheffield, and then
track that's opposite the outliers. We have a direct link. Yeah, it's all right.
Okay, and so we have a recommendation. So the grants listed for 22-23 be agreed. Councillors, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Neil.
I didn't actually just mention the further three organisations at the bottom of page 27. These are organisations and events where they're allocated a total of £6,000 from within the working group budgets, basically. So that's the third item there. And there's a small opportunity for grants to be applied to the town council, which the town clerk looks after. These are small grants for materials and things to help events that go along. He has a £2,000 budget to cover that. So that's the total range of things. Okay, just to clarify that for you. I'll move on then to the next item, which is item 11. This is reports from the task groups, and I'll mention the infrastructure planning group here. We haven't heard very much specific since the last council, although I have just received in my inbox. I must say, I don't know whether anyone else has seen it yet. It probably only goes to Andy and myself at the moment. There is a list now they've published on the medium-term interventions. I think there's 15 items on it. I haven't even had a chance to look at it, which we will need to take a view on, but I don't think we're in a position to do that today. So as the town clerk will confirm, I've been pressing for more frequent involvement of the town council with the infrastructure programme and trying to get more feedback for us. It's been a bit of a struggle. I think Sally at the moment felt that they've been talking so much that they wanted to go away and actually, get their thoughts clarified amongst themselves. But one outcome is that the team has now offered to come and meet the town clerk and myself in a week just to discuss engagement with them. And we will, in that meeting, discuss with them how we can get more engagement from the team and Surrey County Council with councillors here, because I know that the councillors here wish to have a more direct engagement with the project and the council there. Let me just see if there's anything. I'll give way now to Councillor Coleman.
Councillor Coleman.
Thank you. Well, you practically answered my question for me. I mean, I'm very pleased that you and Councillor McLeod have got a list, and I'm very pleased that you and the town clerk are going to meet people. I just wonder when the heck myself as a town councillor is going to be given any information on which I make any decisions. And what I have heard on the grapevine, and I raised it at Strategy and Finance, is far too much general money is being sucked into this project, money that should have been spent on projects related to building development. And instead of it going directly to the area where the building's been, it's been put into this 106 pot. And who's dipping their little fingers into it? This lot. And I just think it's absolutely outrageous. It's not what the 106 money is for. When it's meant to be spent in the area that's taking the hurt, as it were, then it should stay there. And I just want to know when somebody is going to walk into this room, talk to me as a normal human being, and just tell me what the heck's going on in this town that I represent, along with everybody else in this, and work blooming hard for, quite prepared to do that. But we get nothing, absolutely nothing. We get second-hand information if we're lucky. We get these meetings that are pointless. I mean, the boards are the most pointless hour you ever sit through in terms of information. And I just really want to know when we as a town council, I don't know how many times I'll ask the question, I do apologise, when we are going to become part of this project Because at the moment we're not, we just sit there and wait for second or third hand information. Sorry, out of it. Feel better.
Councillor Hess, followed by Councillor Dixon.
Well, that was very good, Councillor Coburn. Do sympathise actually up to a point, quite honestly. But on the Section 106 money, because they're legal agreements, the monies are attributed to whatever the agreement refers to. Legally, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think they should be able to shift money around away from what the money was intended for under the Section 106 agreements. So, and I'm sure I've heard somewhere that we had an assurance that that wasn't going to happen. Chuckles all around the room. No, but I mean, this is a serious point, because if we're talking about legal agreements, they're not things I would have thought that you can just run roughshod over. What does exercise me slightly, which is something that Councillor Hyman, who's a Waverley councillor, flagged up when the parking surplus was taken off into the Farnham infrastructure programme. He suspected that would be the last resort bit for the town centre, and I've got a horrible suspicion that he might have been right. I hope he was wrong, because there's lots of things that we need to do right here, bang in the heart of the town centre, with good hard cash. So when they start saying there isn't money for this, or there isn't money for that, or we've got to apply for funding, or this or that, we know we've got 500,000 and the parking surplus that's been accumulating since that original 500,000 was in the pot. So there's even more somewhere. So there is money there for Farnham. But coming back to the 106 agreements, maybe somebody around the room can confirm that they can't just move it about as they want. Thank you.
So I've got 3 hands up, so I'll have Councillor Dixon, Councillor Merriweather, and then Councillor Coburn can come back.
Yes, I think George said it extremely well. The Section 106 money needs to be paid if it's a specific cycling project, or pathways has to be spent on that project. And this also is for the SILS money, that has to, SIL money is also a ring-fenced, and that has to be applied for through Waverley. So I don't think there is any risk of this money being spent except on projects in Farnham, because it's already specified as projects in Farnham. And the other question is that if we do have these pots of money from developers for these infrastructure projects, then they should be addressed in this project, because are we going to sit there and say, no, we have to hold on to that £40,000? Well, you know, it got this big, I think, no, I don't think they're stealing the money from us or anyone else for that matter.
So I've got Councillor Merriweather, followed by Councillor Coburn, and then Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask everybody to turn to page 15 of the packs?
Page 15.
Page 15. We're looking at the minutes of our very last council meeting. Page 15, 1-5. Page 1-5. So at the very top,
yeah,
on the 16th of December, we discussed a very specific example of where Surrey County Council, or where in fact a developer is negotiating with Surrey County Council to monetize a Section 106 project at a ridiculously low value and pay the cash to Surrey County Council to be used for a farming infrastructure project, which is nothing to do with the cycleway that it was contracted to do under the development in Webber and Adshot Lee. And this is the tip of the iceberg, because nobody today still has ever explained how the Farnham infrastructure project is actually going to be funded. The OIP itself in 2 places says we've got no idea, but we're going to go away and work on it. But if you look at Surrey's budget, it's very clear that it's going to be funded. The Surrey's part of it, which is only a fraction of the total cost, is going to be funded through debt and through shenanigans like this, and through the sale of capital assets, including greenfield land that Surrey owns, which might not necessarily be allocated under the Farnham neighbourhood plan. There's nowhere else for the money to come from. And given Surrey's latest announcements on in its budget cycle, it certainly can't afford any more debt. So it's going to have to be stuff like this and the sale of capital assets. And until Surrey comes clean on where the money is coming from, I'm getting more and more petrified of the cannibalism that's going to have to be done to pay for this project.
Councillor Coburn.
Well, just following on from that, and to answer Councillor Hess's point, I mean, an S106 is just a legal agreement between 2 parties, and it can be varied. And that's what's happening at the moment. You know, you have a legal agreement, it seems very good at the time, and now, you know, Councillor Merriweather said it all. You know, they're varying legal agreements right, left, and centre, just printing money. I mean, this is a good. I'd forgotten that I was in the minutes, so well, I read the minutes, but that's a really good example of it.
Councillor MacLeod.
Well, I'm not aware that there are legal agreements all over the place. I mean, the way Section 106 money works is it's collected by Waverley and then given to the appropriate body that's responsible for that type of infrastructure. And much of it goes to Surrey County Council, and it always has done. Sometimes it sits on lists that nothing is implemented. For example, there's a footpath that runs from someone in northwest Farnham down to the middle of Farnham. The money was allocated to that quite a long time ago. And one thing that the Farnham infrastructure project is doing is actually implementing and using some of that money for the purposes it was intended for. And some of these short-term interventions are going to be funded by Section 106 money, but that's what the Section 106 money was intended to do. And the Farnham infrastructure project is going to implement. They're part of Surrey County Council. They are actually doing within Farnham what this money was intended for in many cases. So it can only be varied by agreement with the developer. The developer actually, and maybe I don't fully understand this one, but the developer can agree with the county council to vary the use of money. But I'm not aware that this is happening all over the place. And as far as I'm aware, much of this section is sectional money in relation to these medium interventions is simply implementing what was intended in the first place. I mean, people have said, well, why is all these things that are on this short and medium term intervention funded by 106 money, as if there's something suspicious about it? There's nothing suspicious about that at all. It's just Surrey implementing, using the money for the purpose it was intended for. I don't know about this particular thing, particularly it's not actually my area, but I'm not aware that this is happening all over the place. And if anyone's going to say that, I have to come up with some examples. Thank you.
Councillor Coburn.
Could we ask, as humble town councillors, that we ask that question? Well, we can't, we never meet anybody, but the town clerk and the leader sort of ask that question directly, you know, how the heck, you miss out the heck, how are you paying for all of this? Because in fact, there was so much information flying around Councillor MacLeod, but the Herald thought of doing a whole piece on it, you know, so it's not more than just bad shot lead. You know, they're all over the place. Towns and parishes are getting very worried, and individual councillors that things are not happening that were given permission. And, you know, we maybe putting two and two together to make five, but it is rather suspicious when we haven't got an answer to the question. So we could, you know, if somebody could nail down how it is all going to be paid for when you meet these people, we'll be very grateful. Thank you.
Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, Andy, but this is an example. This is an example, the example that you're asking for. A Section 106 contract is not just an agreement to pay money to Waverley to disperse, or to Surrey for that matter, to disperse on particular projects. There are also contracts to actually do stuff. And in this case, it was a contract for the developer to build a cycleway adjacent to the development in Badshot Lee. And the developer and Surrey have been, and I don't know how much that would have cost, but I suspect it would have cost a lot more than the amount of cash that the developer is now proposing it give to Surrey County Council to spend on some other project, probably on the priority list. And I can tell you, if it's on the short-term wins priority list, it is not something that's going to happen in Webber and Badshot Lee, because that doesn't even appear on their map.
I've got Councillor Beaman, followed by Councillor Hess.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I absolutely understand with a lot of sure the Western Planning Committee, and I thought it'd be wrong to be voting on the issue in that case. I would like to stress, I think, any changes to variations to 106 agreements have to be approved surely by the Waverley Planning Committee. In fact, in the case illustrated by Councillor Merriweather, in fact, that has been called back to committee for debate and discussion.
Councillor Hess.
Well, I thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Beaman makes an interesting point. It'd be worth finding out whether, in fact, any variations would need to come back to the Planning Committee. I'd like to ask Councillor Merriweather whether, to his knowledge, this cycleway project has been scrapped. I mean, I think we're all getting a reality check here tonight, quite frankly. And I think alarm bells need to be ringing, despite Councillor MacLeod's assurances that all is good in the Surrey County Council backyard. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be, I'm not being rude saying that, but, you know, is this the tip of the iceberg? Are we going to find out after the event that certain projects are not going to happen because variations to these legal agreements have taken place? And I'm thankful to Councillor Coburn for making me aware that these things can be varied, because I hadn't honestly thought of it. I thought a legal agreement was a legal agreement. But I suppose you're right. They can be varied if the parties agree to it. Hadn't crossed my mind. So I think everybody around the table, it's a wake-up call. We need to be on high alert. We need to reinstitute the task group this year now, the infrastructure projects task group, which looks at Section 106 and CIL. And thank you, Councillor Merriweather, for flagging it up. It's a bit worrying. Thank you.
Back to Councillor Merriweather. Would you like to add? And then Councillor Edmonds after that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I mean, the simple question I think that needs answering now is how are they going to pay for it? In October, they wrote the optimised infrastructure plan, and they said they're still trying to figure that out. So even when they wrote the plan, they didn't have an idea. Well, here we are, 4 months later and more. You know, what's the answer?
Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is Councillor Merriweather talking about a planning condition breach? It would be helpful to understand that. Thank you.
No, I'm talking about an application by the developer to vary a Section 106 agreement to pay cash to the to Surrey County Council in lieu of building a cycleway as originally contracted.
Okay, I think Town Clerk and Leader have got the gist of what we're on about, so I'm sure they'll bring that up. Back to you, Councillor Neil.
Okay, so I think the summary of that is that we're looking for visibility of all these projects and interventions, what the source of funding for them is, and which agreements, S106 and anywhere else, is going to be supporting which one. That hasn't been made clear and we haven't discussed it so far. I think it's up to us when speaking to them and through the board to pursue that. Thank you.
Councillor Merrill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's time to be pretty surgical in what we want, because we do tend to get answers which are vaguer than we like. Which Section 106 agreements are up for grabs, and which Surrey assets in Farnham, in and around Farnham, are up for grabs too?
Okay, thank you. I'll progress if I may. So we've covered most of what was there on the IPG, apart from perhaps saying that there has been work going on the wayfinding project between ourselves here as officers and with the project team. And I think that's progressing okay at the moment. Anything else to say there? Town Clerk, do you want to say anything then?
Well, it's moving, but it's not yet in the right place. So Jenny is doing a very good job on getting the detail right, which the consultants are not yet succeeding in doing. So we're hoping it will be, as you said, moving in the right place, but it's not there yet.
Okay, if anyone else is easier.
Please, sorry to interrupt, Leader. Sorry to interrupt, Leader. So look, it said, Farnham Town Council strongly objects to any change in the Section 106 cycleway project as agreed as part of planning application WA 2015-2283 in Badshot Lee. So having done that, having said that, where does that get us? Are we still in the situation where they've taken the money away and the people of Badshot Lee are deprived of a cycleway once and for all, forever? Are they not going to get their cycleway? I'd like it recorded that this council are not happy and do not accept, will not accept, local communities who've taken the pain and not getting the gain because of shenanigans behind closed doors between developers and councils, in this case Surrey County Council. It's not on. It's not on. I don't think we should roll this meeting forward and just let this one go without a stake in the ground to establish once and for all whether Badshot Lee people are going to get their cycleway or whether it's gone into the pockets of Surrey County Council. A nasty little deal behind closed doors between the developer and the county council, depriving people of what they should have had, is not on. I really object strongly. And I don't think we should roll this meeting forward and just let that go.
Ask the Town Clerk to answer that question.
Yeah, I think Councillor S, you probably used some language there that you ought to probably withdraw. Well, there are no nasty deals being done behind closed doors in relation to that particular matter. And the Town Council's view, which you've just expressed, was very clearly recorded in the minutes. That view has been passed on to Surrey County Council. And so the next step is to ask Surrey County Council, as Councillor Merriweather just requested, when we meet with the officers of Surrey County Council next week, where that has got to. So we pass that information on to both Surrey County Council as recorded in the minutes, and we also pass it on to Waverley Borough Council as recorded in the minutes. And if it is going through a process that you outlined earlier, that it will go back to the Waverley Planning Committee to sign off any variation, then it's in a very transparent way. And I think we need to be very careful about the language that we use in terms of attacking other organisations.
Right. I apologise and withdraw the use of nasty backroom deals. I withdraw that and I apologise. However, I wouldn't want this to disappear off the radar, and I think we need clarity about whether the people of Badshot Lee are going to get their cycleway. Absolute clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we move on, Councillor Neil, please, to next item?
Thank you, Mayor. The next item, oh no, there's something else there. I'm looking at the Riverside Sculpture Task Group now. That has been progressing in terms of the Riverside Sculpture. The main intervention there at the moment is that UCA have asked whether we could possibly find a higher level of funding than came out of, I think it was their Section 106 agreement, because they would rather have a commission for about twice the amount of money that is listed there, 38,000 or something I think they're looking for. So we've got to do further work on that. Nothing specific to announce at the moment, I don't think. Also, the working group looked at the terms of reference for the conservation areas task group, the new task group that we're setting up, which is due to meet on the 24th of February. In your notes, you will see the terms of reference outlined there, which was recommended by the Strategy and Finance Group for you. And I think they're just ready to be discussed passed on to the partner councils and the partner organisations that work with us on that task group. Moving on to item 12, consultations. The first one there is the Surrey Hills Area of Natural Beauty, AONB, always get it wrong. So the council here has made a response to the consultation, and there is further work going on. There'll be a further response, I think. Councillor Coburn.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we've been working, if you see the recommendation, anyone was encouraged to get onto the website and send something in. I've been speaking, let's go back to square one. If you look at the original areas of possible extension, and they're both put in the Farnham neighbourhood plan, they're quite tight. And what this new AONB extension is looking to do is to broaden the areas of search. So I've been working, I've been in contact with Rowledge and with Dockenfield to make sure they're perfectly okay. And the idea is that we will join the little bit that is in Rowledge, wash over Dockenfield down to the National Park. So Dockenfield Parish Council is putting in a response to that, and Rowledge has sent in some photographs. And then at the other side, where we've got the bit that comes up to Runfold, which is going to be included, again, we want that to wash over. We want to support Tice's Meadow and wash over the bottom, as it were, the south bit of Badshot Lee, over Runfold St George into Tice's Meadow. So that's what our response is going to have evidence for. We've got various photographs. We're working with Badshot Lee, obviously with Cliff, who has sent some photographs, and in fact, Councillor Merriweather sent some photographs to him, which came to Jenny. And tomorrow we will put the final bit together. We've already sent a letter and a map, but we're going to send over the formatted sort of response as well to make sure everything gets over there. So we'll do that tomorrow and make sure that we have everything. The 6 criteria that you have to go, including landscape, but you also have cultural heritage. And last time when they were looking at Dockenfield, they made much of the cultural heritage of the farming. And I think that there's 12 listed buildings in that bit of Badshot Lee, you know, and Runfold, if you go over saw that bit. And there's 12 listed buildings, all related to farming or hop growing. So I think that's on its own, a reason for keeping some of that cultural heritage, even though that particular area doesn't have the outstanding beauty of some of the fields going to Dockfield. So we're going to give it our best shot. You've still got time if anybody else wants to put something in. It's the end of January. And then, of course, this is the evidence gathering, citizen science, as they call it. This is us lot, and we have to be careful not to use planning speak. It's got to be sort of informal. And then they'll send out the suggested area extension for full consultation. But if you don't ask, you don't get. So we're looking to do 2 washovers, one over Dockfield down to National Park and one over the south bit of Badshot, the Rumble St George, Tices Meadow. And I think that will be a great addition to the AOMB personally. Thank you.
Okay, Town Clerk, do we need a recommendation here?
Yeah, I think members, in hindsight, it would be helpful if we did have a recommendation at this point, or there wasn't a formal recommendation that came through from Strategy and Finance. And the reason why I'm saying that is because the neighbourhood plan identifies, as Councillor Coburn outlined, certain green areas which was based on evidence by HDA. It doesn't cover the point about us making those links up with Dockfield and Mowledge, as we've set out in the discussion that took place at Strategy and Finance. So I wonder if you would be agreeable to something like Council agreed to extending the green area outlined in the neighbourhood plan and the HDA evidence in support of the AOMB to avoid gaps in designation and extend the character of the land extending to Dockfield, Rowledge and Tices Meadow. I mean, that last little bit is not quite right. It's really picking up those 3 areas which have specifically been raised. But I might just ask Councillor Coburn if she could tidy up my words slightly.
It's difficult when they're sort of written down there in a slightly different form. I need notice of something like that. I'm sure you're better than I am at that. But yes, we want to include the wider areas that we have a washover of Dockfield down to the National Park and a washover of Badshot Lee up to Tices Meadow. So we're broadening the area of search, but it is broadened on the Surrey Hills AOMB review website. We're just making sure that we get our case in, because if we look at what I call the pink map on the Surrey Hills AOMB, it definitely does that washover, and it does wash over part of Badshot Lee, but of course it doesn't do Tices Meadow, because Tices Meadow wasn't included. I mean, it hadn't become what it is now when we first looked at this, but now it wants to put itself in. We want to support it. Washover makes sense. So if you look in the neighbourhood plan or on the website, you'll see there's a sort of south bit, which is the Rowledge bit, and this long thin bit, which is the Moor Park bit. And the idea is to make them all join up, so we don't have little chunks. Because the way it's done at the moment, you'd have a little chunk of extra AOMB in Rowledge, but Dockfield would be completely unprotected. And then you get down to National Park. I mean, it doesn't make any sense in designation. So that's why we want to wash over south and then wash over up to the north and east as well. So that's what we're going for. I hope everyone is agreeable to that. I've spoken to all the residents associations, and they're quite agreeable.
So, councillors, we have a recommendation before us. Is that agreed? Thank you very much.
Okay. Carrying on there. So the last item referenced there is relating to our concerns about the neighbourhood plan cover of our safeguarding our planning applications, or when applications come in that might contend against the neighbourhood plan. At the moment, the cover that the neighbourhood plan provides runs out in April this year, and the local plan is not yet in place to take over that position. So Councillor Coburn has made a submission herself to Secretary of State, which is valuable for us, thank you. And the Strategy and Finance Group agreed that the Town Council would make a submission as well, which will be put together by the Town Clerk, Councillor Coburn and myself. And we've been talking to NALC as well to see whether they will come in and make a submission or support us on that one as well. So there's an action there which we're pursuing at the moment. Any questions on that one?
Yeah, sorry, it's not on that point, but for technical purpose, can I assume that Councillor Coburn made the recommendation that you agreed? Can I have a seconder formally? Councillor Atfield, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to item 13, review of council policies. We were expecting to bring something to council about this time, but that's been deferred till March. I'm sure that will be okay for ourselves. So we go on to the last item, which is a town clerk update. Town clerk, would you like to mention anything here? Okay, if there's no questions, you'll see the list there. 9 items that are listed in the report. Any questions on those? If not, no, thank you. That concludes the report from the Strategy and Finance Group.
Thank you very much, Councillor Neil, and thank you, councillors, for all your contributions to that item. So we move on to a working group cemeteries and appeals meeting held on the 20th of January 2022, and I'll ask Councillor Coburn to present that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This will be very brief. You all read it, I hope, and there is one recommendation which I'd like you to put. It involves Hale Chapel. If you remember, we recommended, had a recommendation that we would go along these lines, but we gave the community time to raise some money and come in and do something else, which hasn't happened. So we're asking council to reaffirm the original decision to get on and actually do something with Hale Chapel to produce the garden, and obviously then to seek external experts to help us develop it. Thank you.
Councillor Fraser.
Well, firstly, I'd like to issue my apologies for absence at the meeting on Thursday. Due to my somewhat enfeebled post-COVID memory, I hadn't made notes in my diary. And I hadn't looked at the email, so I apologise for my absence. Not that anything material would have been effective to say, because having worked for 4 months, I have achieved almost nothing. I had 2 meetings in Mr. Richard Hunt's Farnham Society, which was very interesting, but not fruitful in any way at all. Everybody else I've talked with are sympathetic, interested, hopeful that they are not going to pay any money. So I can see no alternative but the recommendation that's been applied. I would like to think, before any demolition takes place, that there might be an opportunity for a reprieve over a short period, but I have very little hope of that. But once again, my apologies for absence.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So we've got 2 recommendations. We'll take them together. To reaffirm the council's decision to part demolish the Hale Chapels to create a landscape garden, and to seek external experts to develop designs for a new garden. Councillors, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Now, could I just make a note of my dissenting?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Councillor Coburn. So we move on next.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I haven't finished. Sorry, and that was a recommendation. I'm quite finished.
Okay.
All I wanted to highlight was something that I keep repeating because I think it's been misinterpreted. And you can all read about maintenance of the cemeteries, but we go into our in bloom competitions not to win the medals, but to get the cemeteries up to the standard that will win medals, well, meadows as well. And so, you know, the whole point of what we're trying to achieve in the cemeteries is to make them exemplary green spaces capable of winning awards. But, you know, we don't spend all year thinking of the award. We spend all year trying to improve the cemeteries, and the award is the icing on the cake. And that's the end of my report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you once again, Councillor Coburn. So that completes item 7 of the agenda. We now move to item 8, the precept for 22-23. And back to you, Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so if you look to Appendix C in the report, this is a report presented by Faculty and Finance covering the precept recommendations. You'll recall from the December Council that we set a gross budget of 1,474,800, which is mentioned in there. And after discretionary income is taken into account, this creates a net budget of 1,231,570. You got it? Yeah. Well, it is around. It was set slightly separately.
Yeah.
I think the town council.
How many people are missing the copy? Just a couple? 3. I should be quick from your neighbours.
Okay, we move on.
Thank you. Apologies for that hiccup there. Okay, so I was saying that the budget, as you know, is mainly funded by council tax precept, but we can, of course, draw on reserves, or we can make further rises to the fees we charge, or indeed we could define other savings. So those are the opportunities for manoeuvre, if you like. This was considered at some depth by the working group, and Strategy and Finance has taken the view that we should continue, as last year, to minimise any council tax increase, bearing in mind the pressures on family budgets. So we have recommended a small precept increase that is well below the target inflation figure of 4.1%. We've also considered dipping further into reserves, but mindful of expenditure demands coming up, and the need to maintain reserves to cover other contingencies. I'll just mention some of the things that we have got coming along which might impact us here. We've got the work on the toilets. There's further work going on with young people. Need to maintain grants and support the Craft Town projects, possibly working Gostree Meadow. We're also mindful of incoming pressures from the principal councils to pick up more local services. And we'll probably be taking on Burley Walk in the near future as well. There's a need to be able to sustain any further inflationary pressures. So we need to be mindful of that as well, because the cost of the services and the things we have to buy in might be more than the inflation figures that are being put around at the moment. So all in all, it is probably prudent for the town council to maintain its current high standing financially to secure any future demands and pressures that are coming along. So that is the reason why we have come up with the figures that we have that are in front of you here. This year we have again ended up well below the sector average for towns and parishes. We're coming in at 1.94% on the recommendation here, as opposed to 2.8% across the country on last year, shall we say. That's where we were last time around. Our precept in the current year is mentioned here as, yes, this year it is £67.37, and it is recommended that this rises to £69.76, which is an extra £2.39 per annum. Now this means that the town council's precept would be about £1.34 a week for each Band D household. And as a percentage, this is an increase of 3.55%, which is well below the expected inflation figures. Councillors, do you have any questions on this report?
So I've got three hands up. So Councillor Edmonds first, Councillor Hess, Councillor Beaman, Councillor Merriweather. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The first point I'd like to make and emphasise is that the Farnham Town Council precept is uncapped. There's no control whatsoever by the government on the amount that we can raise. The second point I'd like to point out is that, albeit it's only 3.5%, which I believe is excessive, the old age pension increase is 3.1%. That could have been a target rather than the 3.5%. Much of what Farnham Town Council does is discretionary. Were I able to attend the council meeting, I would have voted against it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hess. Okay, Councillor Beaman.
Thank you very much. As a matter of interest, what the Black Rose Apartments, the staff to be able to pay next year, and they were paying council tax, and any estimate of that revenue been taken into account? I assume not.
So the way that that applies, it won't be next year that we get that income. If there's a surplus on the collection fund that is retained by the borough council, it's not shared out to the towns and parishes. It is shared out by the principal authorities, i.e. Surrey County Council and the borough council. It's a very difficult matter. You know, the collection rate is put at 98%, and if Waverley made a loss on that, then they would have to then meet that loss. So they're quite prudent too in the way that they manage their collection fund, and such that it's not been in deficit for probably the last 15 to 20 years. But it's a small margin in terms of the amount of money that's left. Those new units will, if they're occupied, will feature in the way that the Band D number is assessed next October for the following financial year. So that's how that works.
Councillor Merriweather, followed by Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I support this, but just with one caution, and that's on inflation. I know, Peter, you mentioned 4.1%. That number was redundant before the ink had even dried on the OBR report. It broke through 5% in the fourth calendar quarter last year. The Bank of England expects it now to be 6% in the not too distant future, and will probably sustain longer than anyone would like either. So just that one word of caution. Thank you.
Councillor Dixon.
I'm trying to understand the different percentages which are on this document. So on page 2, it hasn't got a number on it. We've got a table here, and it says that the FTC increase in the full column in 2021 is 1.94%. And then on the second from last paragraph on the next page, it says, as a percentage, this is well below inflation increase of 3.55%. So, okay, so 21-22, is that this year?
Town clerk will explain that.
So we're only, because I was going to reply to Councillor Edmonds, because we're not increasing it by 3.55%, are we? We're increasing it by 1.94%, are we? I'm lost now.
Town clerk will, if you switch off your microphone.
Yes.
It's Councillor Dixon, as Councillor Coburn pointed out, the figures in the table there to show you how the FTC has been actually very prudent in all those years listed. I mean, between 2015-16 and 2021-22, the total increase of the FTC portion has gone up 16%, whereas the national average parish increase has gone up by 30%. What that table is trying to show you is that the trend has been consistently below the average, and so we've been very prudent with our increases. The figure on the final page, the 3.55%, is the increase that is being proposed for the next year compared to the current year. And I think we'll probably find that that will be close to, if not below again, the national average parish increase, because some parishes have taken on new services and new responsibilities, are again talking about very significant, some of them double-digit increases for the reasons that Councillor Edmonds described, that principal authorities are capped at 2%, or £5 if they're not at the required figure. It's a complicated formula, whereas parishes are not. So some of them are taking on services that the principal authorities can no longer carry out. But Councillor Neal has explained the reasons quite clearly.
Okay, if everyone's happy then, we'll move to the recommendation. So it's recommended that the 22-23 precept be £1,231,570, representing a Band D equivalent amount of £69.76 per annum. Is that agreed, councillors? Thank you very much. Now move on to the planning and licensing applications, and I ask Councillor Fraser to present this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is for the meetings of the 4th and 10th together, the 4th being a time critical supplement, and then the 24th of January 2022. A number of key, large, and potentially controversial projects in applications. Other important applications require detailed review. We had 34, and more routine, uncontroversial applications. We had 52. That's a total of 85 applications applications in 2 meetings. These included 12 trees, 8 certificates of lawfulness, 5 section 73 and 106 applications, 4 PRAs, and 2 NMAs. With Surrey liaison, planning appeals, and licenses. For 65 pages at the end of today's agenda, refer. The thanks are due to the planning officer, Jenny, and fellow councillors for the patience they've shown in this regard. Many of the grumbles we've had in the past have not been attended to. Hybrid attendances for meetings remain unsatisfactory because this is slow. Few email reports have been received from other councillors. Full reviews of all applications before meetings remains impossible. There's an excessive number of documents involved in each task. Explicit titles for those documents remain very elusive. Planning website remains ponderous. Viewing has poor focus. Small images do not enlarge without loss of clarity. The local planning authority planners do not make full documentation available to us. History and constraint documents frequently omitted. These are really, I suppose, the planning process leaves inadequate time for residents' comments. It is unfair and unfair on us to presume what the answers will be. General community development orders are really numerous and they seem to be applied for rather dubious purposes. We've had no news from the House of Commons regarding general committee development orders. And I don't think they ever had time for further debate has been undertaken, and a very interesting debate on the undesirable urbanizing effect of the projected building of new pavements. They don't get parked on anyway, so whatever. Proposals for relocating the Farnham flame in a more appropriate location have been undertaken. Non-material amendments are becoming increasingly material. They get bigger and more important. Baker Oaks resale valuations were referred swiftly from Waverley's valuation and legal teams. We've also revisited the health and safety aspects of storing a large battery power depot of lithium in Waverley. A planning highlight for James has been the PINS Inspector Stevens declaring that only 77% of the earmarked available housing land in Waverley was available for the 5-year period he required. The remaining 23%, in his opinion, was not. It was not deliverable. Well, this sounds bad enough. But national figures appear to indicate that elsewhere in this country, up to 50% shortfalls are occurring. It has to be emphasized that planners determine planning that are not in a position to deliver houses. No. That task falls to developers and building contractors. They are said to be harboring land banks, awaiting enhanced profitability, thus keeping housing supply low and valuations high. The Department for Levelling Out, Housing and Communities is well aware of this injustice, charging planners with naivety and lethargy and much else besides. It has to be said that a borough that is in possession of a fully operating development plan, both the local and neighbourhood authorities, and in possession of an assured 5-year housing land supply available to them, they stand a very good chance indeed of winning in the appeal. But it's not clearly that way otherwise. The situation we are in prompts Whitehall to encourage developers to proceed with little restraint
resulting in the destruction of a generation of localism and democratic community endeavour, the trashing of our local and neighbourhood plans, and the eventual loss of all marginal green acres. We are at grave risk. Meanwhile, apparently orbiting in a parallel universe, the Built Environment Committee of the House of Lords, chaired by Baroness Neville Roth, advocates that more houses be built, despite the fact that the 75% depletion of small and medium-sized house builders has taken place, conspicuous shortage of manpower is now occurring, an acute lack of appropriate skills, and an almost complete absence of apprenticeships. Thus, all building will be in the hands of very large contractors. And thus, the Built Environment Committee calls for more and better planners to cater for demographic pressures and affordability, whilst the levelling up team conspires to bypass the planning process altogether. I'm not particularly partisan, but I detect political conflict is getting in the way of sensible joined up thinking. The only good news I have to report is the benches at Hot Blossom are still in place and are well used. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser, and thank you for giving us that bit of good news at the end. I'm sure we're all grateful for that. Councillor Edmonds, is that an old hand or a new hand?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like just to emphasise the disturbing quality of some of the planning applications. One of particular concern in my ward at the moment is the development of a high voltage storage battery installation at the top of Recklesham Hill, where the developer is trying to manage changes to the conditions of the planning permission, firstly through an NMA, and secondly by a minor amendment. One of the changes that they want to do is to not improve the access to this installation. Well, the installation, as far as I can determine, if it were to catch fire, has a severe impact and possibility of very difficult extinguishment. Therefore, I think that I just need to emphasize that we really need to take care that we make sure that the community are fully aware of the hazardous installations that are taking place in their neighbourhood. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dixon.
Yes, sorry, I have a question which I'm hoping Councillor McLeod might be able to help me with. Some of you will have noticed possibly that there has been an application for Hawthorns on Hale Road, which is a field next to the Six Bells pub, and they're going to build 65 houses, but of course that's outside of the Farnham plan, etc. And in today's Farnham Herald, there's a letter from Mr. Max Wildsmith of the Stacks groups who are going to be building these houses, and he says that in the allocation upon which the Farnham Town Council relies in the current neighbourhood plan have been found untenable following the recent appeal decision at Lockswood Road, Alford, where the inspector found Waverley to be about 885 units short in its 5-year land supply. I was up Waverley a couple of weeks ago, and I understand, I mean, I think Andy was telling us they were actually above our housing units at the moment. So what is the truth in this? Is this there's still Wildstein in the Farnham Herald correct, or is Waverley? I'm sure Waverley is correct.
Microphone. So I can comment that Waverley is considering challenging that the inspector's decision, and we just have to wait and see whether they decide to go ahead with that. The inspector did turn down principally on the lack of the 5-year housing supply, and that's very much what happens. That we at Waverley go around and talk to developers and get their agreement for what they think they're going to be doing in terms of building housing, and that's what we base our estimates in 5-year housing supply on. but the inspectors don't always agree, and this particular inspector didn't agree. The fundamental problem actually is that there's an enormous backlog in Waverley of built houses against the number projected in the local plan. The thing I said at a meeting you were at, Sally, was that in the last 2 years, we have exceeded the number in the original local plan of 590 a year of 600, but and the requirement is now for something like 800 or 900 a year, which is pretty difficult and almost impossible, particularly when sites like Dunport go on hold, which is what's happening right now. So it's not a good position we're in, but that's the situation.
Councillor Coburn.
It's interesting, Councillor Dixon should bring out that letter because I am going to reply to it. Simply because the man is wrong on so many levels, including he doesn't understand the difference between a trajectory and a plan that goes through to 32. And this is one of the arguments that I've been putting to the DLUHC, whatever it is now, or CH, I think, isn't it? Because basically, we don't, the town councils or any neighbourhood plan that allocates sites does not have to have a trajectory. We don't have to prove to anybody that we can build the houses in the next 5 years, but the borough does. And after April 22, we unfortunately will go back to borough rules unless we manage to persuade them to change things. So the man is wrong. Waverley doesn't have a 5-year house, and that's why it was argued at both appeals. So I think we can safely say that will be the accepted position as it was last year after an appeal. But as I say, the fact that Centrum, put that as an argument, Centrum was raised both at the Boxwood Road and at the Red Court appeal. And Centrum is the one, near East Street, basically. Now, it does seem to be slow coming forward. We expected it to be faster, but that doesn't affect the neighbourhood plan because they've got till 2032 to come forward. But it does affect the 5-year housing land supply because they've got to prove that they can build it, or not prove, they've got to have evidence that they can deliver it before 5 years. So he's wrong on so many levels, Councillor Dixon. And I will write a very polite letter. And what I shall actually point out, because I don't think some people in this room understand the amount of time and effort and the number of people involved in this. And that's why we actually want it sort of adhered to. It's an awful lot of sweat and everything else that was gone into that document. And he says something about why on earth do we praise it, like it, or whatever. Well, we like it, it's a bit like one of our children. We've spent 10 or 11 years nurturing this thing. So we're not going to roll over and let him come in. I won't put that in the letter. But he doesn't understand the difference between the local plan, which is essential, and we do need that local full development plan in place, which is the local plan plus neighbourhood plans. We do need that in place. But he's slightly wrong on the sort of implications.
Thank you. Just to say that I think Councillor McLeod and obviously got Councillor Ward here as well. If you can do anything, I think this decision of Lockford Road, Alvin, and I'm not an expert, but if they had come up with a conclusion that says 885 negative numbers, we've got to challenge that, because that if that goes through, that's going to be sort of like case law, so to speak, for every other developer who comes along, surely. So that really has to be challenged. It's not a question of whether or not Waverley should challenge it. They have to challenge it.
Waverley can only challenge on the legal. There's nothing else you can challenge on. If he's erred in law, then you can challenge. If the inspector didn't err in law, he cannot be challenged.
Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I echo what Councillor Campbell said. There is this sort of fundamental flaw in that in these appeals, Waverley believes it has a 5-year housing land supply, and it argues the case. And developers argue that Waverley doesn't, well, they would, wouldn't they? It serves them. In Waverley's case, it's called Waverley's 5-year housing land supply, as if Waverley is responsible for building every single home that's in the numbers. And of course, Waverley has, apart from issuing the planning permission, absolutely no powers or no ability to deliver a single brick, except for the sites that it actually owns and builds out. And in fact, that was one of the motivations behind Waverley's intervention to try and buy Dunsfold, because of the frustration over the lack of progress on what is the single largest site in the 5-year housing land supply, and was the subject of a lot of criticism in Oxford, and also another appeal just recently in Lower Waverham Lane. There was also some discussion about this as well. So it's a subjective matter down to the inspector. Waverley has to present credible evidence that something that will happen that is completely outside of Waverley's control. And anybody who thinks that's a rational way of going about things, I don't think quite understands the issue.
Coburn.
Would just like to point out that, you know, other boroughs in Surrey can actually maintain a 5-year housing land supply. You know, the argument is always it can't be done right, and Banstead do it, Runnymede does it at the moment, working even Guildford. So, you know, it's not one of these things that is absolutely impossible. It's something that we at the moment in Waverley are not achieving. But it doesn't mean that the 5-year housing, I mean, I'd like to see the 5-year housing land supply go. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not promoting it at all. I think it's a silly way of measuring anything. But given that it is there, you know, other people, including other Surrey boroughs, can manage to achieve.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'd like to applaud Councillor Coburn for continuing and persevering with this Alice in Wonderland situation caused by central government. I mean, my take on it is the whole thing's just a complete confection of ridiculousness. You know, that on the one hand, if major developers can be seen not to possibly be able to build out a project that the planning committee or delegated powers have granted permission to, that goes against you. You've got no control over them building it out. What can you do? You give them planning permission, they sit on it, they land bank it. And then if you don't hit your numbers, you get a penalty added to your housing numbers. The whole thing is completely barking mad. You know, we're over a barrel. It's the most developer-orientated system that anybody could have created. You know, they win, because if they don't build it out as an industry, the borough council and its neighbourhood and local plan come under challenge, and the government inspector sides with the government's crazy system and developers. You know, it's a absolutely barking system, and I applaud Councillor Coburn for persevering with this. Frankly, I'd have gone stir crazy doing it, but well done, thank you.
Thank you very much, councillors. So I think that completes our item 9, part 1. So we now move on to part 2, items to note. So actions taken under the scheme of delegation. Clark?
They've all been covered, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Reports from other councils. So have we got any reports from other councils? No? Okay, thank you very much. Reports from outside bodies. Councillor Coburn.
Yes, just very briefly, Mr. Mayor, you handed over, or I volunteered to take over the loneliness project on behalf of the town council, and I have to say it's still going great guns. Hale Community Centre obviously greatly represented there are the Maltings, and they're still working on new initiatives. They've still got an amazing amount of enthusiasm to go. So they're trying everything they can think of to get any lonely person, or whether it's old, young, whatever sex. What I'm trying to say is people are lonely for all different reasons. So they're trying all different projects to get. And one that Farnham Assist came up with was actually a sort of sport watching group. And I thought, well, this is really good because David Gill on the Sports Council and all the chairmen are so outgoing and welcoming that I think they're pushing us an open door there. And I think the rugby club or the football clubs will be really great to, get those men that don't want to do other things, or women, to go to matches. So I have to say, it's a really inspiring meeting. I really enjoy going and seeing it grow, because they have a craft cafe, as you know, but some people don't want to do craft, and so it's trying to get a whole series of projects that we can reach out to as many lonely people in the town as possible.
Councillor Neil.
Yeah, I'll just mention something that comes out of the Public Art Trust for you. The Farnham Flame, which is currently housed in our depot, gathering moss, literally, I think, looking for a new home. The suggestion was it would go on the leisure centre, but that is a little bit in abeyance because the leisure centre might want to, not immediately, but in some time, extend the centre on the wall that they would like to put it on. So that one's gone a bit flat, but the new suggestion has now come up that this flame be placed on one of the two flank walls that you see if you now walk up the road past Sainsbury's car park here. There's two large blank walls, one of which there's now a planning application in place for an illuminated sign, which might be contentious in itself, but that's been considered by our own planning committee. I think Councillor Fraser mentioned that. There's a sister spot there where the Farnham Flame could go, and it is about the right size from both points of view, from the wall's point of view and the flame's point of view. This is an outstanding piece of work, actually. The sculptor is a guy called Alan Collins, which I wasn't aware of, but some of the members here might be, who's an international sculptor. He's got items all over the place, UK and abroad. So it is perhaps a bit more of a significant piece than some of us have realised in the past. So the Public Art Trust would like to get it on a wall if it can, and get it rejuvenated so it is fit to do that. And I'm sharing that with you here. If anyone doesn't like that suggestion, good time to shout. If not, they are going to make a submission to Crest Nicholson to see whether that can go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It might look really good on the wall, restored, with some background lighting or something like that. But adjacent to an illuminated, what was it, Scotty? Billboard?
Yes.
Which will detract from it. You've got the elevation, you've got some kind of neon, what is it, advertising? What is it? Some garish sort of display that the developer wants to put. Sorry. Yeah. So there's this garish display that the developer wants to put there on one side, and then you've got what one would hope would be a stylish, tasteful sculpture on the wall on the other, it would detract from it. So I hope that it could stand alone, so that it would display really well and not be detracted from by this neon display thing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we move on then? Yep, piece of information for the town clerk.
Yeah, Councillor Neil has said this is being proposed by the Farnham Public Art Trust to Crest. There's a lot of work to go on before anything happens, because they'll need structural engineers reports because of the nature of that particular wall as to whether or not the plane can go on it. So it is a request that Crest will not even have that yet. So I think we need to be very cautious about setting hairs running that may not be going anywhere. So it's only something that's emerged from the Farnham Public Art Trust that's been reported to you. It can be passed on to Crest, but they have no obligation to accept the suggestion either. Yeah.
The main reason I brought it up was just to see if there was a reaction here one way or the other, because we can use that to help guide them on their submission. Thank you.
Councillor Coburn.
Well, they've had it offered to them before and didn't want it. I mean, that's where we started. You know, we have the Woolmead and they didn't want to put it on their new building, so we tried Crest Nicholson, they didn't want it. We tried Acker, they don't want it. You know, it's I'd be very, very surprised if Brightwells turns around now and say, oh yeah, the very thing we need is a 1970s sculpture. I just don't see it happening. But you know,
Especially if we can't have our illuminated board.
Okay, let's move on then. So I think we've come to the end. So the date of the next meeting is to agree the date of the next meeting as Thursday, the 17th of March 2022 at 7 p.m. There's no need for confidential items, no need for exclusion of press and public who aren't here anyway. So I declare the meeting closed at 9:30. Thank you very much, councillors.